Good morning, everybody. You know, I'm used to thinking of newspapers as original source material, as documents, as organizations which store our history and are responsible for not just developing a narrative which massages people's feelings and manipulates their ideas to believe things temporarily and then quickly forget and flee on to the next thing. But there's a lot of people who are used to that orientation as well. And there was a time in my life when I subscribed to 3 print newspapers at the same time. Because I wanted to be informed, I subscribed to the Wall Street Journal, and I regularly had the New York Times and then another print newspaper. And I would go through these on a daily basis and try to sift out what was actually happening in current events. And of course, when I did my research as a young person, I was familiar with working with both the old ticker tape machines where the AP press wires would be churning out data and it would be printed on these massive sheets, and then we would recycle those in boxes and carry them to trash bins. I was also accustomed to working with microfiche, so that you could have a stored record in a library and then you would be able to go and access that. Well, we live in a day and age when historical documents can be altered automatically. And if you think about George Orwell, his character Winston, who worked in the Ministry of Truth, he was responsible for recycling and reinventing the historical narrative, because of course we've always been at war with Eurasia, or we've always been at war with Asia, right? So the famous saying was, he who controls the present controls the future. He who controls the future controls the past. And that would mean that the historical narrative, hey you guys, you're on a live video. I don't know if you want that. I'll see you guys. It's nice to see. Are you coming on Monday? Let me finish making this video and I'm making a live video on Facebook right now. I got groupies. What can I say? Love you guys. Thank you. So every time these days somebody stops and wants to talk. All right, so where was I? So you had this historical narrative where people would open the journals, the official journals, to learn who they were at war with that day. Well, a lot of people they talk about George Orwell's 1984 a lot, and they talk about less so George Orwell's Animal Farm. Both are great books, but he did a lot of other reportage that is equally misunderstood. People talk about 1984 all the time, but now we're living in a day and age when the Rochester Post-Bulletin is literally able to not just edit or redact stories online in real time. The Rochester Post-Bulletin actually makes stories that don't fit their current narrative vanish. They have no archive where people can access information that they were printing just a few months ago. So I happen to have some print version editions of their stories, which vary greatly from the ones that they ended up having online for people to see. These do involve, for instance, the topic, are we becoming less civil? Well, I think that's the case. When you have a newspaper that's able to make certain stories vanish or change the narrative of that story, once the print version's gone, a few days later, they'll change the story online because it doesn't fit the new narrative or it doesn't fit what they want people to think about the narrative. Are we becoming less civil? Yes, I think we are. We also know that the Rochester Post-Bulletin donated, when they lost their real building, now they're renting space here, but when they lost their real building downtown, they turned over their archives to the public library. And a lot of those documents have been destroyed. So I'm just thinking about what it means to have a history, right? At the Minnesota state level, the archives that are housed below that grand lawn out in front of the Minnesota State Capitol building, those archives are actually falling into disrepair and misuse and disuse. They're actually going away. What this means, when your history vanishes, they can rewrite it or recreate it in a way that's going to fit their new next. That would also involve the influence of, say, Maoist thought, where you have to make the old ideas vanish, the old people, the old ways. Those ideas need to go away in order for new ideas to come into play. So are we becoming less civil? I think so, because now it's just about power. There's no actual accurate historical narrative. When a newspaper can make a story change with the push of a button. Winston, in the Ministry of Truth, would have been shocked at that level of power. But that was his job, to try to recreate stories that were in the past and destroy the archive where it didn't fit the current narrative. He sat at his desk doing that all day long. Another great film that is similar to that would be Brazil, directed by Terry Gilliam, one of our own Minnesota directors, the only American who worked with Monty Python's Flying Circus. These people understood the danger when one organization can construct a narrative and push a political agenda. I encourage everybody who has any truck with the Rochester Post-Bulletin to look really closely at your narrative. And if you have any influence over these people, try to reach out and tell them to do better. Beg them to do better, because some of us still believe in the institutions of newspapers. We would like the Rochester Post-Bulletin to recover from what it's currently under. Anyway, thank you everybody. I got to get going now.